flying device here is a floating Flexi floss, span flex, or sometimes called floating apps worm, and this is pretty close to the original tying. The original fly, just move that out of the way for a second. The original fly didn't have a sighter, and the problem with it was the fly was hard to see, takes were hard to detect, especially if you've got a little ripple on the water, which we often do over here. So the prototype got amended to, I suppose, what we might call the original, because there's the one that we fish now, to have a sighter on it. So I suppose, how do we add the sighter is a question. So basically it's straightforward enough, he says. So when you add your sighter, basically it looks like this. So what we do is we take some floating yarn, so this is a Semperflight poly yarn, and I find we're often fishing for mullet a lot of the time in bright sunshine, calm weather, so the darker colours, blacks and browns, quite good. But you might be fishing in other light conditions, so it pays to have maybe a white or some other coloured sighter. Normally I'm using red foam, but just on that one there it was brown. So what we do is take a piece of yarn, whatever thickness you want, and basically you fold it over and you attach some nylon or fluorocarbon, whatever you want, and it needs to be pretty thin, so you probably look at something around 7x be ideal, or you can use monofilament thread. That's another option. So on this one it's monofilament thread. You'll trim this then to whatever length you want. So all you'll be doing is you'll be threading the other end, if you can see this hopefully, through a normal needle, and then you take your piece of foam. So either use 6mm foam, or you could use, well, you could use different diameters, but what I use is about 6mm, so it's a length of 6mm booby cord, and I'm just cutting that in half for a second. So that's roughly half, and I'm going to split that down the center. The reason I like to do this is I'm going to end up with one flat side and one curved side, like so, and the flat side is going to be laying along the fly and the curved side is going to be up on the back. So we're going to just find it roughly the center of this, and we're going to thread our sighter down through it. So it's going to come down through it, and we'll just add a tiny drop of super glue to the knot and a little bit on the mono or fluoro, whatever you're using, and just pull it down through, and afterwards then you can just trim off the excess, that'll be on this side, and there's your sighter. And you can have them in all sorts of colors, so a lot of the ones I use are black. You can tie them with brown, good option again in a bright day, or you can use white, or indeed if really low light or in dark, you can actually use glow in the dark as well. I can't take a video of glow in the dark, it's bright, so I'll add a still of a glow in the dark sighter so that you can see what that's like. In the vise we have a partridge big mouth single size 12 partridge size 12, which is really useful because there's a very wide gap. They're not a hook you come across all that often, I find, here in Ireland anyway, but certainly they're good. An alternative would be some of the short shank specials, although I'd say the gap on these, or gape some people say, is really, it's really wide, so find that really helpful. So let's get to it. So we're going to add some red thread. We start behind the eye and bring our thread down. The one thing I would say is use a flat thread, as I'm tying the original pattern for the floating mullet worm, which is basically a Flexi floss or span flex worm. Yeah, it's sometimes called the floating apps worm as well, but regardless, it's a floating worm pattern with rubber legs, we can say that much, but very, very good fly for mullet with a couple of years for me now. So what are we going to start with? That's a good question. We'll start with the legs. So you're looking for a very, very bright red ideally. You can try other colours, but a bright red span flex or flexi floss. This one, as far as I can remember, is a vineyard. There's a good bit gone from it now at this stage. Just cut off two of those. So vineyard and Sabai do a nice red as well, so any of those would be good. So your flexi floss or span flex, sometimes it's called span flex. So we're looking for a length about, I would say, twice the length of the hook body, 2.5 times. Probably better to go long, and you can trim it afterwards if you feel it's too long anyway. So I'm going to catch that in on top. Just a little pinch and loop to catch it in, and I'm going to go forward. I'm going to get just 1 or 2 turns to start it off, and then not too tight, just hold it on top. We'll be going back down over this, so pays just to take your time, keep this on top. If it falls to the side, it's not the end of the world, but try and keep it on top all the way along the shank, right up to just short of the eye. And now we can start to go back down. Okay, I'm going to trim the front ones just to make life easier for me. Now, so on the way down, I'm going to catch in 2 strands of peacock herl. So you're looking for 2 strands that have a nice bit of fibre on them, nice bit of herl on them. So just to show you the difference, here's another one. So hopefully you can see this one. I wouldn't throw it away, we'd use it for other patterns, useful on buzzers. You can strip the herl off and just leave the quill, and it makes a nice rib and so on other flies. But for this, we want a lot of the herl, nice bright green herl. I'm going to break off a little bit of the tips, or you can snip them off, whichever, just to strengthen the herl a little bit. Okay, if you tie it in too close to the tips, the chances are it will break when you're bringing it forward, so you don't want that. So 2, you could maybe use 3. I'm going to go with 2. There you go. Okay, now I'm going to come forward and just drop that down. I'm going to come back about halfway, and one of those waist ends that I cut off, I'm going to attach that in. Okay, so I'm just going to attach it in with a figure of 8, catch it roughly in the center. Okay, or if you want to be sure catching it in the center, you can bring it around the thread like so. Okay, then just a little figure of 8 just to get it sticking out. Now, don't worry if it's sticking forward. I want to leave it just sticking forward for a second, and we pull it back on the way up because we have to tie in our foam back. So this is the back for the fly. So it's a piece of red booby cord foam, and it's been split down the middle, and then I've added a sighter to the top. This one has a black sighter. You can have all different coloured sighters on it, and I'm just going to snip a little V in the back here for the tail as well. So I'll just do that there now. Does the V do anything? I can't say for sure, but I like the look of it, so you can see it's done. So this is the way the original was tied, and this is the way pretty much all the variants have been tied as well. So I'm going to catch that in. Now you can see here it's important that it's a flat thread, because if you have a very fine strong thread material, you're likely to cut through that foam and just slice it in half. So you want a fairly flat. So on the original I used UTC 140, so that's what I'm going to use today, simply because we're sticking to the original pattern. And the same on the original, I used the peacock curl. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to put 2 very loose turns on top of the span flex. The idea here is when I wrap the herl up the body, then effectively I can stop where that middle section started and release these, and you'll see as I go. I'm going to add a tiny drop of super glue just to strengthen up the herl. You could use lacquer, you could probably tie it without any, but we'll just add a drop there. Okay, be careful not to glue your fingers together or glue your span flex to your thread while it's sticking forward. So I'm going to just get back in under here with this. Okay, just make sure I'm getting back in at the start. Okay, so I should be about where the span flex is there now. Get maybe one more, and I'm just going to locate the legs. Just get in front of these now. Okay, so you can see they're starting to sit out to the side a bit more. That should be about it. Continue up to just behind the eye. I'm just going to do 2 turns behind to lock it in, and 2 turns in front, and we can trim off our peacock curl. Be careful not to cut any of the legs or your thread. Okay, and that's most of it done, and we're just going to pull this forward over the front. Strap it down with a loose turn first, and you can see it's going to push the legs down, and we might need to trim those a tiny bit afterwards. So a couple of turns and then just tighten down on it. So I'm just going to come in underneath everything here, a couple of turns, and I'm just going to secure it with 2 hitches. Okay. Now, looking pretty good. Okay, so at this point your fly is done pretty much. These legs are a little bit long, so I'm just going to grab the 2 of them. One of them looks longer than the other. I'll just give them a little trim, and they should look pretty good now. Okay, I normally trim this just short over the eye, so I kind of come in at an angle and then I come in towards your side at an angle. Hopefully you can see this, and just leaves a little piece sticking out over the front here. So yeah, that's pretty much your finished fly, and you can add a whip finish. You can fit it in here. It's a bit tricky with the legs, but take your time. And it fell off, as things do. You could use the whip finish tool, but I'm not used to using one, so I'm going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. And there we go. Perfect. Okay. And there's your finished fly, and you can just, you can just turn it upside down, and you can add a drop of glue or lacquer. I'm actually just going to add a tiny drop of super glue to this one. I have a needle here somewhere. I'm going to use a needle to apply it. So what I'm doing is just getting a drop onto the tip of the needle, so that I prefer to do this because I don't want it to get into the eye of the hook and block the eye. Okay, and if you want, you can add a touch in here, but you need to get it right in, because when the super glue sometimes reacts with water, it might go white and just mess up the appearance of your fly. But lacquer is good as well. You can use lacquer or varnish. I'm just using glue just to really the way the original pattern was done. So there you have it. Again, you can trim this to whatever length you like, and you can use different colored sliders. So a great pattern that sits in the surface film, and Mullet really like it.